Chapter 1. The telegram from Mayfair. The late autumn rain pattered against the windows of Hercule Poirot's impeccably tidy London flat, a soft percussion that did little to disturb the Belgian detective's methodical morning routine. Seated at his polished mahogany desk, Poirot sipped his tisane, the steam curling upward like a delicate wisp of thought. His small, precise hands adjusted the alignment of a silver letter opener, ensuring it lay parallel to the edge of the desk. Order, symmetry, these were the foundations of his world, the scaffolding upon which his formidable intellect constructed solutions to the most perplexing mysteries. It was a quiet Tuesday, the kind of day Poirot cherished for its lack of clamor, allowing his little gray cells to hum contentedly in contemplation. Captain Hastings, his dear friend and occasional chronicler, was away visiting relatives in the countryside, leaving Poirot to enjoy the solitude. Yet, as he often mused, fate had a way of interrupting even the most serene moments with the tantalizing lure of a new case. At precisely 10:30, a sharp rap at the door broke the stillness. Poirot's valet, George, entered with a silver tray bearing a single telegram. "For you, sir," George said, his tone as measured as the tick of the mantel clock. Poirot's neatly manicured fingers plucked the telegram from the tray. "Merci." "George," he murmured, his green eyes glinting with curiosity. Telegrams, in Poirot's experience, were rarely bearers of mundane news. They carried urgency, distress, or, most intriguingly, the promise of a puzzle. He slit the envelope with the letter opener, extracting the crisp paper within. The message was brief, but laden with import. "Poirot, urgent. My niece Clara Ashbourne missing. Fear foul play. Please come at once. Ashbourne Manor, Mayfair. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his quickening interest. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, a name that conjured images of old wealth, grand estates, and the intricate webs of high society. Her niece, Clara, was unknown to him, but the word missing sang like a bell in his mind. A vanishing heiress. Perhaps? The possibilities were deliciously complex. "George," Poirot called, rising from his chair with the grace of a man half his age. "Prepare my overcoat and hat. I shall be visiting Mayfair. And telephone for a taxi, s'il vous plaît." "Very good, sir," George replied, already moving to fulfill the request. Within the hour, Poirot was ensconced in a black cab, the rhythmic clatter of its wheels on the wet cobblestones a counterpoint to his racing thoughts. Mayfair, with its elegant Georgian terraces and air of discreet opulence, was a fitting stage for a mystery. Ashbourne Manor, he recalled from society columns, was a jewel of the district, its mistress a widow of considerable fortune and influence. For such a woman to summon him directly suggested a matter both grave and delicate. The cab drew to a halt before a Palladian mansion, its white stone facade gleaming despite the drizzle. Wrought iron gates bore the Ashbourne cresta, stagged beneath an oak tree, and a liveried footman hurried forward with an umbrella to escort Poirot to the entrance. The detective noted the man's tense posture, the quick glance over his shoulder. Fear, perhaps, or suspicion. The household, it seemed, was already in disarray. The grand oak door swung open, revealing a marble-floored hall adorned with ancestral portraits and a glittering chandelier. A butler, tall and gaunt with eyes like polished slate, stepped forward. "Monsieur Poirot?" "I am Grayson, the butler. Lady Evelyn awaits you in the drawing-room." "Merci, Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, handing over his hat and coat. He followed the butler through a corridor lined with gilt-framed mirrors, his patent leather shoes clicking softly. The air carried the faint scent of beeswax and lavender, but beneath it lingered something less tangible, a hint of unease. The drawing-room was a study in restrained elegance. Pale blue walls, silk draperies, and a roaring fire that cast flickering shadows across a suite of Chippendale furniture. Lady Evelyn Ashbourne rose from a high-backed chair, her silver hair swept into an impeccable chignon. She was perhaps 60, her face etched with lines of worry, yet retaining the commanding beauty of her youth. Her black silk gown rustled as she extended a gloved hand. "Monsieur Poirot, thank heaven you've come," she said, her voice low, but steady. "I am at my wit's end." Poirot bowed, kissing the air above her hand. "Madame, I am at your service. Pray, tell me of this misfortune with Mademoiselle Clara." Lady Evelyn gestured to a chair opposite hers, and Poirot sat, his posture erect, his hands folded neatly in his lap. A maid entered with a tea-tray, her hands trembling as she poured. Poirot noted the girl's pale face, the way her eyes darted. To Lady Evelyn, before she retreated. Another thread to tug, he thought. "My niece, Clara, is 22, Lady Evelyn began, her fingers tightening around a lace handkerchief. "She is my late brother's only child, and the heiress to the Ashbourne fortune. She has lived with me since her parents' tragic death 10 years ago. Clara is spirited, but kind-hearted. 3 days ago, she vanished without a trace." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Vanished, madame? From this house?" "Yes. She was last seen in the gardens after dinner on Friday. She told her governess, Miss Lyle, she wished to take the air. When she did not return, we searched the grounds, the house everywhere. Nothing. No note, no sign of her. Only," Lady Evelyn hesitated, her gaze dropping to the fire. "Only what, madame?" Poirot prompted gently. "Her shawl was found near the garden gate, caught on a thorn bush. It was torn, as if she had been pulled away." Poirot leaned forward, his interest sharpening. "This gate, it is locked at night?" "Always," Lady Evelyn said. "Grayson insures it. But the key hangs in the butler's pantry, accessible to the staff." "And the shawl, may I see it?" Lady Evelyn nodded, ringing a small silver bell. Grayson reappeared, his expression unreadable. "Fetch Clara's shawl from the study, Grayson." As the butler departed, Poirot studied Lady Evelyn. "Madame, forgive my directness, but was Mademoiselle Clara content here? Were there disputes, perhaps, or suitors who might have persuaded her to leave?" Lady Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "Clara was restless, I admit. She chafed under the expectations of her position. As for suitors, there were none I approved. She is young, Monsieur Poirot, and the fortune makes her a target for opportunists. I was negotiating a suitable match with Lord Haverford's son, but Clara resisted." Poirot nodded, filing away the information. A spirited heiress, and unwanted betrothal motives for flight or foul play were already multiplying. Grayson returned with the shawl, a delicate weave of cashmere in soft rose. Poirot examined it, noting the jagged tear and a faint smudge of dirt along the hem. "This was found near the gate, you say? Was the gate locked when you discovered her absence?" "Yes," Grayson replied, his voice clipped. "I checked it myself at 10 o'clock, as is my custom." Poirot's mustache twitched again. "And yet, madame, you fear foul play. Why?" Lady Evelyn's eyes met his, haunted. "Clara would not leave without a word. She is impulsive, yes, but not cruel. And yesterday I received this." She reached into a drawer, producing a folded note. It was slipped under the door at dawn. Poirot took the note, written in a hurried scrawl. "Do not search for Clara. She is safe. Speak to no one." The paper was cheap, the ink slightly smudged. He sniffed it, discreetly faint traces of tobacco and coal dust. A clue, perhaps, to the writer's environment. "This is most serious," Poirot said, folding the note carefully. "Madame, with your permission, I would like to see Mademoiselle Clara's room and speak with the household. Of course, Lady Evelyn said, rising. Anything to bring her back. Clara's room was on the second floor, a feminine haven of pale green walls and floral chintz. The bed was neatly made, a silver hairbrush gleaming on the dressing table. Poirot moved with deliberate care, his eyes sweeping every surface. A wardrobe held rows of silk gowns, their richness a testament to Clara's status. A jewelry box, unlocked, contained pearls and sapphires. Nothing appeared missing. He paused at the writing desk, where a leather-bound diary lay half-hidden beneath a stack of novels. With a glance to ensure he was alone, Poirot opened it. The entries were brief, written in a flowing hand, October 10th. Aunt Evelyn insists on Haverford. I cannot bear him. He speaks only of hounds and stocks. Asterisk, asterisk, October 12th. Met V. Again, he understands me. We must be careful. Asterisk, asterisk, October 14th. I dream of freedom. V. promises a way. Tomorrow, perhaps. The final entry, dated the day of her disappearance, was incomplete, the ink trailing off as if interrupted. Poirot's pulse quickened. V, he murmured. A lover? A conspirator? The diary was a treasure trove, but it raised more questions than answers. He slipped the diary into his pocket, intending to study it later. As he turned to leave, his eye caught a glint beneath the bed. Kneeling with surprising agility, he retrieved a single pearl earring, its mate nowhere to be found. Another clue, small but significant. Downstairs, Poirot began his interviews. Miss Lyle, Clara's governess, was a mousy woman in her 30s, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Clara was like a daughter to me, she said, twisting a handkerchief. She was upset about Lord Haverford, but she wouldn't run away. She promised to tell me if she ever felt trapped. Poirot noted her sincerity, but also her nervousness. Did Mademoiselle Clara mention anyone? Special? A friend, perhaps? With the initial V? Miss Lyle's face paled. No, monsieur. She kept to herself lately. A lie, Poirot thought, but he let it pass for now. Next, he spoke with Rupert Ashbourne, Clara's cousin, a handsome man in his late 20s, with a charming smile and shifty eyes. Clara's always been a bit wild, Rupert said, lounging in an armchair. Probably off on some lark. Shoe turn up. Poirot's gaze sharpened. You seem unconcerned, monsieur. Yet, as a cousin, you stand to gain if Mademoiselle Clara does not return. Rupert's smile faltered. That's a grim thought, Poirot. I'm fond of Clara. Besides, Aunt Evelyn's fortune is hers to control. The maid, Jenny, was last. She hovered near the door, her apron clutched tightly. I saw Miss Clara in the garden that night, she whispered. She was near the gate, talking to someone. I couldn't see who, but she looked frightened. Poirot leaned closer. And you told no one? I was scared, sir. Mr. Grayson don't like us gossiping. The interviews complete, Poirot returned to the drawing-room, where Lady Evelyn awaited. Madame, he said, I have begun to unravel the threads of this mystery. Mademoiselle Clara's disappearance is no simple flight. There is secrecy. Here, and perhaps danger. I shall remain in London and pursue every lead. Lady Evelyn clasped his hand. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Bring her back to me. As he stepped into the rain-soaked evening, Poirot's mind buzzed with possibilities. The torn shawl, the cryptic note, the diary's V, the pearl earring, each was a piece of the puzzle. The household's guarded words hinted at hidden motives, and the shadow of a forbidden romance loomed large. He hailed a cab, the diary heavy in his pocket, resolved to follow the trail wherever it led. The game, as his friend Hastings might say, was afoot. And Hercule Poirot, with his little gray cells and unyielding tenacity, would not rest until the Vanishing Heiress was found. Chapter 2. Whispers in the drawing-room. The drizzle had thickened into a steady rain by the time Hercule Poirot returned to Ashbourne Manor the following morning, his umbrella casting a small halo of protection over his immaculate suit. The air was heavy with the scent of wet leaves and coal smoke, a fitting backdrop for the mystery that had begun to take shape in his mind. The telegram, the torn shawl, the cryptic note, and Clara's diary with its tantalizing mention of V. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot was determined to weave them together. Inside the manor, the atmosphere was no less oppressive. The grand hall, with its towering portraits and gleaming marble, seemed to hold its breath, as if the very walls were complicit in Clara Ashbourne's disappearance. Poirot's sharp eyes missed nothing. The faint scuff on the floor, where a rug had been hastily repositioned, the flicker of unease in the footman's glance as he took Poirot's coat. Secrets, he thought, were as plentiful here as the crystal. In the chandelier, Grayson, the butler, greeted him with the same impassive formality as the previous day. "Lady Evelyn is expecting you, Monsieur Poirot," he said, leading the way to the drawing-room. His gait was precise, but Poirot noted a slight stiffness in his shoulders. A man accustomed to control, yet unsettled, Lady Evelyn sat by the fire, her posture regal despite the strain etched into her features. "Have you news, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice a mixture of hope and dread. "Not yet, madame," Poirot replied, settling into a chair. "But I have questions, and the answers. They will lead us to Mademoiselle Clara. I wish to speak with the household, one by one, in this room. It is here, I think, that truths may be persuaded to emerge." Lady Evelyn nodded, her fingers tightening on her handkerchief. "As you wish. Grayson will arrange it." The first to be summoned was Grayson himself. The butler stood before Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, his gray eyes steady but guarded. Poirot began with a disarming smile. "Monsieur Grayson, you are the guardian of this household's order, n'est-ce pas? You see all, know all. Tell me, what did you see on the night Mademoiselle Clara vanished?" Grayson's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "As I told Lady Evelyn, sir, I locked the garden gate at 10 o'clock, as is my custom. Miss Clara was in the garden earlier, but I assumed she had returned to her room. I saw nothing unusual." "Nothing unusual," Poirot repeated, his tone mild but probing. "Yet a young woman, the heiress, disappears, and her shawl is found torn near a locked gate. You checked this gate yourself, you say?" "Yes, sir. It was secure." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching. "And the key?" "It hangs in your pantry, accessible to the staff." "Could someone have taken it?" Grayson hesitated, a crack in his composure. "It's possible, sir, but I keep a close eye on it. The staff know better than to touch what isn't theirs." Poirot nodded, dismissing him with a wave. "Merci, Monsieur Grayson. You may send in Miss Lyle." Miss Lyle, Clara's governess, entered next, her small frame dwarfed by the grandeur of the room. Her mouse-brown hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her eyes, still red from weeping, darted nervously to Lady Evelyn before settling on Poirot. He gestured to a chair, his manner gentle to put her at ease. "Mademoiselle Lyle," he began, "you were close to Clara, yes? Confidante, perhaps. Tell me about her state of mind before she disappeared." Miss Lyle twisted her handkerchief, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clara was unsettled, monsieur. She disliked the idea of marrying Lord Haverford's son. She felt trapped, like a bird in a cage. But she wouldn't run away without telling me. We had no secrets." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No secrets?" Yet in her diary, Clara mentions a V, someone she met in secret, someone who promised her freedom. "Who is this V, mademoiselle?" Miss Lyle's face drained of color, her hands trembling. I don't know, monsieur." "She never mentioned anyone by that initial. Perhaps it was a nickname, or a mistake. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. A mistake? None, mademoiselle. Clara wrote with purpose. If you know something, it is best to speak now. For her safety. Miss Lyle's eyes filled with tears. I swear, monsieur, I know nothing of a V. Clara was private about some things, even with me. I only want her safe. Poirot studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. You may go. Please send Monsieur Rupert. Rupert Ashburn sauntered into the room with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to charming his way through life. His tailored suit and polished shoes spoke of wealth, but his eyes, dark and restless, betrayed a hint of unease. He dropped into a chair, crossing one leg over the other, and flashed a disarming smile. Well, Poirot, he said, any luck finding our wayward Clara? Poirot's smile was polite but cool. Monsieur Rupert, your cousin is missing, perhaps. In danger, yet you seem untroubled. Why is this? Rupert shrugged, his smile unwavering. Clara's always been dramatic. Loves her novels and her little rebellions. She's probably off somewhere, playing the runaway heroine. She? Be back when she's bored. Poirot's fingers steepled beneath his chin. And if she does not return? The Ashbourne fortune, it is considerable, non? With Clara gone, who benefits? Rupert's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. You're barking up the wrong tree. Poirot, I'm fond of Clara, and I don't need her money. Aunt Evelyn controls the purse strings, and I do well enough on my allowance. An allowance, Poirot mused, which might increase if Mademoiselle Clara were out of the picture. Tell me, where were you on Friday night? Rupert leaned back, his tone casual, but his fingers tapping restlessly on the armrest. In my room, reading. Grayson can vouch for me. I asked for a brandy around 9. Poirot made a mental note to verify this with Grayson. And did you see Clara that evening? Perhaps in the garden, near the gate? No, Rupert said quickly. I was nowhere near the garden. Look, Poirot, I want Clara found as much as anyone. She's family. Poirot dismissed him with a nod, his mind already sifting through Rupert's words for inconsistencies. The cousin's nonchalance was a mask, he was certain. But for what? As Rupert left, Poirot rose and paced the room, his small, precise steps. A counterpoint to the crackling fire. The interviews had yielded fragments. Grayson's guarded precision, Miss Lyle's nervous denials, Rupert's calculated charm, but no clear picture, the diary's V. Remained a shadow and the torn. Shawl suggested struggle or haste. Yet something else nagged at him, a detail overlooked. He paused by the fireplace, his eyes drawn to the ornate mantel. A faint smudge of ash caught his attention, barely visible against the polished marble. Kneeling, he examined the hearth and found a scrap of paper, charred at the edges, wedged behind a log. With delicate fingers, he retrieved it, unfolding it to reveal a few legible words. Midnight, by the gate. Trust no one. Poirot's pulse quickened. The handwriting matched Clara's diary. This was no accident. It was a clue, perhaps her final act before vanishing. The note suggested a planned meeting, one shrouded in secrecy and danger. Had she been lured to the garden gate? Or had she fled willingly, only to be betrayed? He slipped the fragment into his pocket, alongside the diary and the pearl earring. The drawing room, with its silks and shadows, had given up one secret, but others remained. Poirot turned to Lady Evelyn, who had watched his movements with growing anxiety. Madame, he said, this note confirms that Clara's disappearance was no whim. She planned to meet someone at midnight, near the garden gate. I must examine this gate myself, and I will need to question the staff further. There is deception here, but fear not, Hercule Poirot will uncover it. Lady Evelyn's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Do whatever you must, monsieur. Just find her." As Poirot stepped into the corridor, Grayson appeared, his face a mask of professionalism. "Shall I fetch the gardener, sir? He tends the grounds, and might know something." "Of the gate." "Oui, Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, his gaze lingering on the butler's impassive features. "And tell me, did you light the fire in the drawing-room this morning?" Grayson blinked, a rare lapse in his composure. "Yes, sir, as always." Poirot nodded, filing away the butler's reaction. The charred note, the locked gate, the mysterious V. The pieces were beginning to align, like stars in a constellation. He would visit the garden next, but already his little gray cells were humming with possibilities. The truth, he knew, was close, hidden in the whispers of the drawing-room and the shadows beyond. Chapter 3. A locked garden gate. The rain had softened to a fine mist as Hercule Poirot stepped into the gardens of Ashbourne Manor, his patent leather shoes crunching lightly on the gravel path. The air was sharp with the scent of damp earth and fading roses, and the sprawling grounds stretched before him, a labyrinth of manicured hedges, stone fountains, and autumn-bare trees. Somewhere in this verdant maze, Clara Ashbourne had vanished, and Poirot's keen senses were alert for any clue that might illuminate her fate. Grayson had summoned the gardener, a wiry man named Thomas Finch, who stood waiting near a wrought iron bench, his cap twisted nervously in his calloused hands. Finch was in his 50s, with a weathered face and eyes that darted like a cornered hare's. Poirot noted the man's mud-stained boots and the faint tremor in his fingers, signs of unease. Perhaps, or merely the chill of the morning. "Monsieur?" "Finch," Poirot began, his voice smooth and encouraging. "You tend these gardens, yes? You know their secrets, their rhythms. Tell me what you saw on the night Mademoiselle Clara disappeared." Finch shifted his weight, glancing toward the manor as if expecting to be overheard. "I weren't here late, sir," he said, his voice rough with a West Country burr. "Finished me work at dusk, locked the shed, and went home. But I heard Miss Clara was in the garden earlier, near the gate." "The gate," Poirot repeated, his green eyes narrowing. "Show me this gate, s'il vous plaît." Finch led the way along a winding path, past a lily pond where koi glimmered beneath the surface, to a secluded corner of the estate. The garden gate was set into a high stone wall, its iron bars twined with ivy. A heavy padlock secured it, gleaming dully in the mist. Poirot knelt, heedless of the damp ground, and examined the lock closely. Fresh scratches marred its surface, faint but unmistakable, as if a tool had been used to force it open. The surrounding ivy was disturbed, some leaves crushed, others torn. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his fingers tracing the scratches. "This lock, it was tampered with, n'est-ce pas? Pa? Not opened with a key, but forced." Finch's eyes widened. "I didn't notice, sir. I swear, I checked the gate every evening. It was locked tight when I left." Poirot rose, brushing his hands together. "And yet, Mademoiselle Clara's shawl was found here, torn. Tell me, monsieur. Finch, did you see anyone near this gate that night? A stranger, perhaps, or one of the household?" Finch hesitated, his gaze dropping to his boots. I don't like to speak out of turn, sir, but I did see someone just as I was leaving. A figure, cloaked-like, moving quick near the wall. Couldn't see their face, but they weren't one of us. Too tall for Miss Clara, and not the master's build." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his quickening interest. "A cloaked figure, you say? And you did not report this?" Finch's face reddened. "I thought it was nothing, sir. Poachers, maybe, or a vagrant. Didn't want to trouble Lady Evelyn without cause." Poirot nodded, though his eyes held a glint of reproach. In a matter such as this, monsieur, every detail is of consequence. This figure, did they carry anything? A bag, perhaps, or a tool? Finch frowned, scratching his chin. Can't say for sure, sir. It was dark, and I was some distance off. But they moved purposeful, like they knew where they were going. Merci, Monsieur Finch, Poirot said, dismissing him. Remain available, if you please. I may have more questions. As Finch retreated, Poirot turned his attention to the ground near the gate. The gravel was disturbed, scuffed in a pattern. That suggested a struggle or hurried movement. He crouched again, his eyes scanning the earth beneath the ivy. There, half buried in the soil, was a small, glinting object, a cufflink, silver, with a curious design of a paintbrush and palette. Poirot's pulse quickened. This was no gardener's trinket, nor did it belong to the polished Rupert or the austere Grayson. It hinted at someone else, someone with a connection to the arts, perhaps someone like V. He pocketed the cufflink, adding it to his growing collection of clues: the diary, the pearl earring, the charred note. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. The gate, with its scratched lock and torn ivy, suggested Clara had been taken or had fled through this very portal. But by whom and why? Poirot stepped back, his gaze sweeping the garden. The path to the gate was secluded, shielded by high hedges from the manor's windows. A perfect place for a clandestine meeting, he thought, or an ambush. The note he had, found in the drawing-room midnight by the gate. Trust no one echoed in his mind. Clara had planned to meet someone here, someone she trusted, or someone who had deceived her. He returned to the manor, his mind buzzing with possibilities. Lady Evelyn was in the library now, a vast room lined with leather-bound volumes and dominated by a portrait of a stern-faced Ashbourne ancestor. She looked up as Poirot entered, her face pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot, have you found something?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Oui, madame," Poirot replied, holding up the cufflink. This was near the gate, where Clara's shawl was found. The lock, it has been forced, and the ground bears signs of a struggle. I believe Mademoiselle Clara was taken from the garden, perhaps against her will. Lady Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Taken? But by whom? And why? That, madame, is what I must discover, Poirot said. The note you received. Do not search for Clara. She is safe, suggests her captor, wishes to keep her hidden, perhaps for ransom. But there is more. Clara's diary speaks of a V, someone she trusted, someone who promised her freedom. Do you know of anyone with this initial? Lady Evelyn shook her head, her eyes wide. No, monsieur. Clara never mentioned such a person. Her friends were few, and none with that initial. Could it be a code? Perhaps, Poirot mused. But I think it is a name, or a nickname. And this cufflink, its design, suggests an artist, a painter perhaps. Does anyone in your circle fit such a description? Lady Evelyn frowned, thinking. There is Victor Duval, a local artist. He painted Clara's portrait last summer. She admired his work, but I saw no closeness between them. He's a charming man, but unreliable. A bohemian, you might say. Poirot's interest sharpened. Victor Duval, he repeated, the name resonating with the V in Clara's diary. Where might I find this Monsieur Duval? He has a studio in Chelsea, Lady Evelyn said. I can provide the address. Excellent, Poirot said, his tone brisk. I shall visit him at once. But first, madame, I must ask, has anyone in the household shown unusual behavior since Clara's disappearance? A maid, perhaps, or your nephew Rupert? Lady Evelyn hesitated, her gaze flickering to the window. Rupert has been distant. He spends much time in town at his club, and Jenny, the maid, has been jumpy, dropping things. I thought it was worry for Clara, but... Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. Merci, madame. I will return. With news. As he left the library, Poirot's thoughts churned. The scratched lock, the cloaked figure, the artist's cufflink, and Clara's secretive rendezvous pointed to a carefully orchestrated plan. Victor Duval was a lead, perhaps the key to unlocking the mystery. But the household's reticence, Grayson's stiffness, Miss Lyle's tears, Rupert's evasion suggested complicity, or at least knowledge they were unwilling to share. Outside, Poirot hailed a cab for Chelsea, the cufflink heavy in his pocket. A garden gate had yielded its secrets, but they only deepened the enigma. Clara Ashbourne had passed through that gate, willingly or not, into a world of shadows. And Hercule, Poirot, with his relentless logic and unerring instinct, was determined to follow her trail wherever it led. Chapter 4. The Locket's Secret. The Chelsea streets bustled with the muted energy of a rainy afternoon. Artists and poets weaving through the crowds, their umbrellas bobbing like black poppies. Hercule Poirot's cab rolled to a stop outside. A narrow, ivy-clad building, its faded sign proclaiming Duval's studio. The name Victor Duval, mentioned by Lady Evelyn and hinted at in Clara's diary as V, had set Poirot's little gray cells alight. The cufflink found by the garden gate, with its paintbrush and palette design, pointed to an artist, perhaps. This very man. Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes sharp with anticipation, and stepped into the drizzle. The studio's door creaked open to reveal a cluttered space, alive with the scent of turpentine and linseed oil. Canvases leaned against walls, some vibrant with half-finished portraits, others draped in cloth. A skylight cast dim, watery light over a wooden easel, where a painting of a young woman unmistakably Clara Ashbourne stood unfinished, her eyes rendered with striking intensity. Poirot's gaze lingered on the canvas, noting the care in each brushstroke. This was no mere commission. It was a labor of affection. A man emerged from a curtained alcove, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands stained with paint. Victor. Duval was in his early 30s, with tousled dark hair and a face that balanced charm with a hint of roguish unease. His eyes, a piercing blue, flickered with surprise at the sight of Poirot's immaculate figure amid the chaos. Monsieur Duval? Poirot inquired, his tone polite but firm. I am Hercule Poirot, private detective. I am here concerning Mademoiselle Clara Ashbourne. Duval's smile was quick. Almost too quick. Clara? Why, I haven't seen her in weeks. She sat for her portrait last summer, as you can see. He gestured to the canvas, his movements casual, but his shoulders tense. What's this about? Poirot stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Duval's face. Mademoiselle Clara has vanished. Monsieur, 3 days ago from Ashbourne Manor. I believe you know more than you say. Duval's smile faltered, and he wiped his hands on a rag, leaving streaks of crimson paint. Vanished? That's terrible, but I assure you, I know nothing about it. Clara was a client, nothing more. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of skepticism. A client, you say? Yet her diary speaks of a V who promised her freedom, someone she met in secret. And this, he produced the silver cufflink from his pocket, holding it up to catch the light. This was found near the garden gate, where Clara was last seen. A curious design, non? A paintbrush and palette, much like those you use. Duval's face paled, his fingers tightening on the rag. That could belong to anyone. I'm not the only artist in London, Monsieur Poirot. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. But you are the artist who painted Mademoiselle Clara with such devotion. And you were seen, monsieur, near the manor's garden gate, cloaked and moving with purpose. Duval's eyes darted to the door, as if gauging his escape. That's absurd. I was here, In my studio, working late. Ask anyone in the building. Poirot tilted his head, his gaze piercing. And yet, monsieur, your cufflinks are distinctive. I notice you wear none today, but your shirt, he gestured to Duval's rolled-up sleeves, where a faint stain of paint matched the cufflinks' design. It betrays you. Tell me the truth, or I shall take this matter to the police. Duval sank onto a stool, his bravado crumbling. All right, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. I did see Clara that night, but I swear I didn't harm her. She came to me desperate. Sighed she couldn't face marrying that Haverford fellow. She wanted to run away, start fresh somewhere. I cared for her, monsieur. More than I should. Have? Poirot's eyes narrowed. You cared for her, yet you let her vanish? Where did she go after your meeting? Duval shook his head, his voice low. She wouldn't tell me her plans. Said it was safer if I didn't know. She was frightened, kept looking over her shoulder, like someone was watching. We met at the gate, but she left alone. That's the last I saw of her. Poirot studied him, weighing the sincerity in his tone against the nervous flicker in his eyes. And this? He produced the charred note from the drawing-room. Its words midnight. By the gate, trust no one still legible. This is Clara's hand. She wrote of a meeting at midnight. With you, I presume? Duval nodded reluctantly. Yes, she sent me a note, asked me to meet her there. But I swear, monsieur, I only wanted to help her. Before Poirot could press further, a soft knock interrupted. The studio door opened, and a young maid from Ashbourne Manor, Jenny, the nervous girl from Poirot's interviews, stepped inside. Her face pale. Monsieur Poirot? She said, her voice trembling. I found something in Miss Clara's room. Lady Evelyn said to bring it to you. She held out a small velvet pouch, her hands shaking. Poirot took it, opening it to reveal a gold locket, its surface engraved with a delicate rose. Inside was a miniature portrait of Victor Duval, his features unmistakable. Poirot's pulse quickened. This was no casual keepsake. It was a token of intimacy, a secret Clara had kept close. Where did you find this, Mademoiselle Jenny? Poirot asked, his tone gentle but insistent. In Miss Clara's jewelry box, sir, Jenny said, her eyes darting to Duval. It was hidden, tucked, under a false bottom. I only found it when I was tidying this morning. Duval's face flushed, and he rose, his voice sharp. That doesn't mean anything. Clara admired my work, that's all. She must have kept it as a memento. Poirot's gaze hardened. A memento, monsieur? Hidden so carefully? Non, this speaks of a connection deeper than you admit. Mademoiselle, Clara trusted you, perhaps loved you, and yet she is gone, and you claim ignorance. Jenny shrank back, her eyes wide. I didn't mean to cause trouble, sir. I just thought you should know. You did well, mademoiselle, Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod. As she hurried out, he turned back to Duval, holding up the locket. This, combined with the cufflink in Clara's diary, places you at the heart of this mystery. If you are innocent, monsieur, you will help me find her. Where might she have gone? Who did she fear? Duval slumped, his defiance draining away. I don't know where she went, I swear. But she mentioned someone watching her, someone from the manor. She wouldn't say who, only that she didn't feel safe there anymore. Poirot pocketed the locket, his mind racing. The locket confirmed Clara's connection to Duval, but his story, while plausible, rang hollow. The fear Clara described, the cloaked figure by the gate, the forced lock-all pointed to a larger scheme. Was Duval a lover aiding her escape, or a manipulator with darker motives? I shall verify your account, Monsieur Duval, Poirot said, his voice cold. Remain in London. If you attempt to leave, I will know. Duval nodded, his eyes haunted. I want her found, monsieur. More than you know. Poirot left the studio, the locket and cufflink heavy in his pocket, alongside the diary, earring, and charred note. The rain had stopped, and a weak sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the street. Clara's trail was growing clearer, yet more complex. The locket suggested a forbidden romance, but the fear Duval described hinted at a threat within Ashbourne Manor itself. Was it Rupert, with his restless ambition? Grayson, with his guarded demeanor? Or Miss Lyle, whose tears masked something unspoken? As he hailed a cab back to Mayfair, Poirot's thoughts turned to the Manor staff. Jenny's discovery of the locket was a breakthrough, but her nervousness suggested she knew more than she had revealed. The household was a nest of secrets, and Poirot was determined to unravel them. The locket's secret had brought him closer to Clara, but the shadow of danger loomed larger than ever. With each step, Hercule Poirot felt the puzzle tightening, and he would not rest until the vanishing heiress was found. Chapter 5. Shadows on the train. The London air was thick with coal smoke and the hum of evening traffic as Hercule Poirot boarded a train at Victoria Station, his neatly pressed suit a stark contrast to the bustling crowd of commuters and travelers. The lead provided by Jenny, the nervous maid, had been a revelation, a station porter at Ashbourne. Manor's local stop had reported seeing a young woman matching Clara's description, boarding a late train to London on the night she vanished. The porter's account, relayed through Lady Evelyn's inquiries, described a veiled figure, hurrying and alone, clutching a small valise. Poirot's instincts told him this was no coincidence. Clara had left the manor, but whether by choice or coercion remained the heart of the mystery. The train's whistle pierced the dusk as it lurched forward, bound for King's Cross, where the porter's sighting had been confirmed. Poirot settled into a first-class compartment, his small, precise hands folded over the silver-headed cane resting across his knees. The locket with Victor Duval's portrait, the paint-stained cufflink, the charred note, and Clara's diary, all nestled in his pocket, were pieces of a puzzle that refused to align. The diary's mention of V, and Duval's reluctant admission of a secret meeting suggested a romantic entanglement, but the forced garden gate and Clara's fear hinted at something darker. Poirot's little gray cells buzzed with possibilities, each scenario tested and discarded as the train rattled through the rain-soaked suburbs. He began his inquiries with the conductor, a stout man with a bristling mustache and a ledger tucked under his arm. "Monsieur," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet, "I am investigating a matter of great urgency. On Friday night, a young woman, perhaps veiled, boarded this train at Mayfair. She was alone, carrying a valise. Did you see her?" The conductor frowned, scratching his chin. "Friday, you say? We get plenty of passengers, sir, but I do recall a lady like that. Kept her face hidden, paid in cash for a single to King's Cross. Seemed nervous, kept looking out the window like she expected to be followed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And did anyone approach her, speak with her?" "Not that I saw," the conductor replied. "She stayed in her compartment, door shut, got off at King's Cross, and vanished into the crowd." "Merci," Poirot said, slipping a coin into the man's hand. "If you recall anything more, you will inform me, oui?" The conductor nodded, pocketing the coin, and Poirot moved through the train, questioning passengers who frequented the Friday night route. A middle-aged woman in a tweed coat, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically, proved more observant. "I saw her," she said, peering over her spectacles. "Pretty thing, even with that veil." She was fidgeting, kept clutching her bag like it was her lifeline. There was a man watching her, though, from the next compartment. Tall, dark coat, hat pulled low. Didn't like the look of him. Poirot leaned forward, his pulse quickening. This man, did he follow her when she left the train? The woman shook her head. Can't say. I got off at Vauxhall. But he was staring, no mistake. Made my skin crawl. Poirot thanked her and continued his inquiries, but no other passenger recalled the veiled woman or the mysterious man. At King's Cross he disembarked, his eyes scanning the bustling platform. The station was a cavern of noise porters shouting, steam hissing, travelers hurrying to their destinations. Clara had stepped into this chaos, and Poirot was determined to trace her path. He approached a porter, a young man with a quick smile and a cap askew. Monsieur, you saw a young woman, veiled, arrive here on Friday night's train from Mayfair. Where did she go? The porter nodded eagerly. Aye, sir, I remember her. She was in a right hurry, didn't want help with her bag. Headed straight for the taxi rank, but I saw her drop something at ticket stub, I think. I called after her, but she was gone before I could catch up. Poirot's mustache twitched. This stub, do you have it? The porter rummaged in his pocket, producing a crumpled bit of paper. Found it on the platform after she left. Didn't think much of it till now. Poirot smoothed the stub, his heart leaping. It was a tram ticket, dated Friday, for a route to Grimpen Lane, a seedy district near the docks. The name stirred. A memory Grimpen Lane was home to cheap lodging houses and disreputable hotels, the kind of place a fugitive might seek to vanish, or be hidden. Merci, messieurs, Poirot said, slipping the porter a shilling. You have been most helpful. As he hailed a cab to Grimpen Lane, Poirot's mind raced. Clara had reached London, alone and frightened, but the man in the dark coat suggested she was not unwatched. Was he Victor Duval, following her from their midnight meeting? Or another figure, perhaps the cloaked stranger seen by the gardener? The locket with Duval's portrait confirmed their connection, but his claim of innocence rang hollow. And a ticket stub, this was a tangible lead, a thread leading into the city's underbelly. The cab wound through London's fog-choked streets, the gaslights casting eerie halos. Grimpen Lane was a stark contrast to Mayfair's elegance. Narrow, cobbled, lined with sagging buildings and the faint stench of the river. Poirot's destination was the Hotel Elysium, a drab establishment whose faded sign promised rooms. By the hour, the irony of the name was not lost on him. Inside, the lobby was dim, the air heavy with tobacco and damp. The manager, a wiry man with a scar above one eyebrow, eyed Poirot suspiciously from behind a chipped counter. "What's a gent like you doing here?" he asked, his voice a low growl. Poirot smiled, undeterred. "I seek information, monsieur. A young woman, perhaps veiled, arrived here on Friday night. She may have been alone or with a companion. Do you recall her?" The manager's eyes narrowed. "Lots of folks come through here. Don't make it my business to pry." Poirot slid a pound note across the counter, his gaze steady. "Perhaps this will sharpen your memory." The manager pocketed the note, his expression softening slightly. "Might have seen a girl like that. Checked in late. No luggage, but a small bag. Paid for a room, one night only. Left before dawn? Alone?" Poirot pressed dot. The manager shrugged. "Didn't see anyone with her, but I don't watch the back door. She was in room 12. Haven't cleaned it, yet business has been slow." Poirot's heart quickened. "Show me this room. S'il vous plaît." The manager led him up a creaking staircase to a narrow corridor, where room 12's door hung slightly ajar. The room was small, its wallpaper peeling, the bed unmade. Poirot's eyes swept the space, noting the single window, its latch loose, and a faint scent of lavender Clara's perfume. He was certain. On the floor, beneath a rickety chair, lay a silk scarf, rose-colored, identical to the one found at the garden gate. Poirot knelt, examining the scarf. It was crumpled, one edge frayed, but intact. "This is hers," he murmured, adding it to his collection of clues. The room offered little else, a cracked mirror, a dusty Bible, but as he turned to leave, a sudden scream pierced the silence. Echoing from the alley below, Poirot rushed to the window, his cane tapping urgently. In the dim alley, a figure darted into the shadows, too quick to identify. The scream had been brief, cut off abruptly, leaving only the patter of rain and the distant clatter of a cart. Poirot's pulse raced. Was it Clara? Or another victim of the same unseen hand? He turned to the manager, who had gone pale. "Who was that?" Poirot demanded. "Don't know, sir," the man stammered. "Could be anyone drunk's thieves. This ain't a safe place." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You will inform the police, and you will tell me if this woman returns. Here is my card." He pressed a card into the manager's hand, his voice firm. Mademoiselle Clara's life may depend on it. As he left the hotel, the scarf heavy in his pocket, Poirot felt the mystery deepening. Clara had reached Grimpen Lane, but the screen suggested danger still stalked her. The man in the dark coat, the forced gate, the locket's secret all, pointed to a conspiracy, with Victor Duval at its center, or as its pawn. Poirot hailed a cab, resolved to confront Duval again, but first he would return to Ashbourne Manor. The household secrets were unraveling, and the scream in the alley was a warning that time was running out. Chapter 6. The hotel on Grimpen Lane. The fog clung to Grimpen Lane like a shroud as Hercule Poirot stepped from the cab, his polished shoes clicking against the uneven cobblestones. The Hotel Elysium loomed before him, its sagging facade a grim sentinel in the twilight. The scream he had heard from the alley, an abrupt, chilling cry, still echoed in his mind, urging haste. Clara Ashbourne's rose-colored scarf, found in room 12, confirmed she had been here, but the mystery of her disappearance grew only murkier. Was she a fugitive, fleeing an unwanted marriage, or a victim, ensnared by an unseen hand? Poirot's little gray cells thrummed with purpose as he entered the hotel, determined to unravel the truth. The lobby was as he had left it, dim, stale, and heavy with the weight of secrets. The manager, Mr. Cutler, stood behind the counter, his scarred eyebrow twitching as Poirot approached. The pound note Poirot had given earlier had loosened the man's tongue, but his eyes betrayed a wariness that suggested more was being withheld. "Monsieur Cutler," Poirot began, his voice smooth but edged with authority. "The scream I heard explain it, and tell me more of the woman who stayed in room 12. Every detail, s'il vous plaît." Cutler shifted, his fingers drumming on the counter. "Like I said, sir, this ain't a quiet neighborhood. Screams happen drunks, fights, whores. As for the girl, she checked in late Friday, paid cash, no name. Room 12 was hers for the night. Didn't see her leave, but the maid said the room was empty by morning." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "No name, you say? Yet your ledger must record something. Show it to me." Cutler hesitated, then pulled a battered ledger from beneath the N. Counter, flipping to the relevant page. The entry was brief. Room 12, single occupant, female, 11:45 p.m., Friday. No name, only a scrawled initial C, and a note of payment in cash. Poirot's pulse quickened. The C was surely Clara, but the absence of a full name suggested deliberate anonymity. And this maid, Poirot pressed. She cleaned the room? She saw nothing else? Cutler shrugged. "Maggie's off today. She mentioned the scarf, that's all. Said the bed was barely touched, like the girl hardly slept." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the details. "I will see room 12 again, monsieur, and you will ensure no one disturbs it until I am finished." Cutler grunted, tossing a key onto the counter. "Suit yourself. Up the stairs, same as before." The Staircase creaked under Poirot's measured steps, the air growing colder as he ascended. Room 12 was unchanged, its peeling wallpaper and sagging bed a stark contrast to the opulence of Ashbourne Manor. The rose-colored scarf, now in Poirot's possession, had been the only clear trace of Clara, but he was certain the room held more. Secrets. He moved methodically, his eyes scanning every surface, his fingers probing for hidden clues. The loose window latch caught his attention again. He opened the window, peering into the alley below where the scream had originated. The narrow passage was empty now, its cobblestones slick with rain, but a glint near a drain caught his eye. Leaning out, Poirot spotted a small metal object half buried in the muck. He retrieved a handkerchief, wrapped it around his cane, and carefully fished the object out a brass key, its bow engraved with a faint A, the Ashbourne crest. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, turning the key in his hand. It was too small for the garden gate, but it might fit a lock within the manor, perhaps a desk, a box, or a hidden compartment. Its presence here, in the alley below Clara's room, suggested she had dropped it in haste or struggle. Or had someone else discarded it? He pocketed the key and continued his search. Beneath the bed, where the scarf had lain, he found a faint smudge of dirt, distinct from the room's grime. It was reddish, like clay, not the black soil of Grimpen Lane. Poirot scraped a sample into an envelope, his mind flashing to the gardens of Ashbourne Manor, where the paths were lined with crushed brick. Had Clara carried this dirt from the manor, or had her captor? As he straightened, a faint creak from the corridor drew his attention. He moved silently to the door, opening it to find Maggie, the maid, frozen mid-step, a dustpan in hand. Her eyes widened, her freckled face paling. Under Poirot's scrutiny, "Mademoiselle Maggie," Poirot said, his tone gentle but firm, "you were not expected today, yet here you are." "Why?" Maggie clutched the dustpan, her voice trembling. Just cleaning, sir. Mr. Cutler said the room needed doing." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Cleaning, when you are told to leave it untouched?" "Non, mademoiselle, you are here. For another reason. Speak, or I shall summon the police." Maggie's shoulders slumped, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean no harm, sir. I heard you was asking about the lady in room 12. I found something else, after I told Mr. Cutler about the scarf. I was scared to say." She reached into her apron pocket, producing a crumpled piece of paper. Poirot unfolded it to reveal a hotel receipt, dated Friday, for room 12. But the name scrawled on, it was not Clara's, it was Mr. Black. The receipt noted a second occupant. No name given, and payment for one night. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mr. Black, you say? Did you see this man?" Maggie shook her head. "No, sir. I was off Friday night. But I heard Mr. Cutler talking to someone on the telephone, saying Black. Was a regular, always paid extra to keep things quiet." Poirot nodded, slipping the receipt into his pocket alongside the key, scarf, locket, cufflink, diary, and charred note. "You have done well, mademoiselle. Tell no one of this, and stay away from this room, for your safety." Maggie nodded. Scurrying away, Poirot returned to the lobby, where Cutler was polishing the counter with exaggerated nonchalance. "Monsieur Cutler," Poirot said, his voice cold, "you failed to mention a Mr. Black, who shared room 12 with a young woman." "Who is he?" Cutler's scar twitched, his eyes narrowing. "Don't know no Mr. Black. Must be a mistake in the ledger." Poirot leaned closer, his gaze unyielding. "A mistake?" "No, monsieur. You are a man who sees much and says little. But I am Hercule Poirot, and I see more. This Mr. Black, who is he? And where may I find him?" Cutler's jaw tightened, but the weight of Poirot's stare broke his resolve. "All right," he muttered. Black's a name used by a fellow who comes here sometimes. Pays well, keeps to himself. I don't know his real name, but he's got a flat in Whitechapel. Number 17, Raven Street. That's all I know." Poirot memorized the address, his mind racing. Mr. Black a pseudonym, perhaps for Victor Duval, or another player in this intricate game. The key with the Ashbourne crest suggested a connection to the manor, and the reddish dirt hinted at Clara's journey from Mayfair to this squalid hotel. The scream in the alley, though, was a warning danger was close, and Clara's trail was growing cold. He left the hotel, the fog swallowing his figure as he hailed a cab for Whitechapel. The receipt from Mr. Black was a breakthrough, but it raised new questions. Was Clara traveling with this mysterious man, or had she been lured? Here under false pretenses? The household at Ashbourne Manor Grayson's stiffness, Miss Lyle's tears, Rupert's evasions loomed in his thoughts, each a potential link to Mr. Black. As the cab rattled through the fog, Poirot clutched the brass key, resolved to follow. This new lead to its end. The Hotel Elysium had yielded its secrets, but the Vanishing Heiress remained just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of London's underbelly. Chapter 7. The Man Called Black. The fog thickened as Hercule. Poirot's cab wound through the labyrinthine streets of Whitechapel, where gaslights flickered like wary eyes in the gloom. Number 17 Raven Street was a narrow tenement, its brickwork stained with soot and time. The address, provided by the shifty hotel manager Cutler, promised answers, or at least a confrontation. The name Mr. Black, scrawled on the Hotel Elysium's receipt alongside Clara's brief stay, was a shadow in the mystery of her disappearance. Was this Black an ally, a captor, or a fiction woven to obscure the truth? Poirot's little gray cells hummed with anticipation as he stepped onto the slick cobblestones, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. The tenement's door was unlocked, creaking, open to reveal a dim stairwell smelling of damp and stale tobacco. Poirot climbed to the second floor, his eyes scanning the peeling wallpaper and scuffed floorboards for any sign of Clara's presence. At flat 17, he knocked sharply, his posture erect despite the oppressive air. The door opened a crack, revealing a familiar face. Victor Duval, the artist, his paint-stained shirt now covered by a worn jacket. His blue eyes widened, then narrowed as he recognized Poirot. "Monsieur Duval," Poirot said, his voice smooth but edged with accusation. "Or should I say Mr. Black? It seems we meet again under less artistic circumstances." Duval's jaw tightened, but he stepped back, allowing Poirot to enter. The flat was sparse, cluttered with canvases and the detritus of a bohemian life. Empty wine bottles, scattered brushes, and a sagging sofa. A single candle burned on a table, casting long shadows across a half-finished sketch of Clara, her face rendered with haunting precision. "What do you want, Poirot?" Duval asked, his tone defensive. "I told you everything at the studio. I don't know where Clara is." Poirot's mustache twitched as he produced the hotel receipt, holding it up like a prosecutor's exhibit. "This, monsieur, says otherwise. Room 12 at the Hotel Elysium, registered to a Mr. Black, with a second occupant a young woman, undoubtedly Mademoiselle Clara. You were there, were you not?" Duval sank onto the sofa, his hands raking through his hair. "All right, yes, I was. Mr. Black. It's a name I use to avoid trouble creditors, mostly. Clara came to me that night, after the garden gate. She was terrified, said someone at the manor was watching her, threatening her. She begged me to help her get away." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind sifting through Duval's words for truth or deception. "And so you took her to that squalid hotel? A curious choice for an heiress, non?" Duval's face flushed. "It was her idea. She didn't want to be found, not by her aunt, not by anyone. The Elysium's the kind of place no one asks questions. I got her the room, stayed a few hours to make sure she was safe, then left. She was gone by morning. Poirot paced the small room, his cane tapping softly. You expect me to believe you left her alone, in such a place, knowing she was frightened? And this, he produced the brass key with the Ashbourne crest, found in the alley below room 12. This was dropped outside her window. It suggests a connection to the matter, perhaps to someone who followed her. Tell me, monsieur, what do you know of this key? Duval stared at the key, his expression a mix of confusion and fear. I've never seen it before. Clara didn't have it when we met. Maybe she dropped it, or someone else did. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Someone else, you say? The man in the dark coat, perhaps seen watching her on the train? Or the cloaked figure by the garden gate? You are not alone in this, Monsieur Duval. Who else is involved? Duval rose, his voice rising with him. I don't know. I swear, I only wanted to help her. She mentioned someone at the manor, someone close. She wouldn't say who. She was scared, kept saying, trust no one, like in that note you found. Poirot paused, his mind flashing to the charred note midnight by the gate. Trust. No one in Clara's diary, with its cryptic references to V. And freedom. Duval's story aligned with the evidence, yet his evasion suggested he was holding back. The key, the receipt, the scarf, the locket all pointed to a conspiracy, with Duval at its heart or caught in its web. Very well, Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. Let us assume, for now, that you speak the truth. But there is more, monsieur. A scream was heard in the alley below Clara's room, moments after I found her scarf. If she was safe, as you claim, who screamed? Duval's face paled, his hands clenching. A scream. I don't know. I wasn't there. Maybe it was someone else, a street girl, or Poirot cut him off with a raised hand. None, monsieur. Too many coincidences surround you. I will search this flat, with or without your consent. If you are innocent, you will not object. Duval hesitated, then nodded, his shoulders slumping. Go ahead. I've nothing to hide. Poirot moved methodically, his eyes scanning every corner. The flat was a chaos of art supplies and papers, but beneath a pile of sketches, he found a small wooden box, its lock matching the brass key's size. His pulse quickened as he inserted the key. It turned smoothly, clicking open to reveal a single item, a folded note written in Clara's hand. He unfolded it, reading quickly. V, meet me at the coast, St. Mary's Cove, Tuesday. Bring the papers. We'll be free. The note was dated the day after her disappearance, suggesting she had left the hotel alive and with a plan. But the mention of papers intrigued him. What documents could Clara, an heiress under her aunt's control, need so desperately? Poirot turned to Duval, holding up the note. This, monsieur, UO1 system. Monsieur, explains this note. It is in Mademoiselle Clara's handwriting, dated after her disappearance. Arranging a meeting with you at St. Mary's Cove. What papers was she referring to? And why did you not mention this plan? Duval's eyes widened, his voice hoarse. I didn't know about that note. She never told me about St. Mary's Cove. The last I saw her was at the hotel. I swear it, Poirot. Poirot's mustache twitched, his skepticism palpable. You claim ignorance, yet this note, found in your possession, suggests otherwise. You will come with me to the police, Monsieur Duval, unless you provide a better explanation. Duval's face crumpled, and he sank back onto the sofa. All right, he said, his voice barely a whisper. There were papers, legal documents. Clara had a copy of her father's will, hidden from Lady Evelyn. It gave her control of a trust fund, independent of her aunt. She wanted to use it to start a new life, away from the manor. I was helping her get them to a solicitor in London. But she disappeared before we could. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you kept this from me? Why? I was scared, Duval admitted. If Lady Evelyn found out, she'd ruin me. And when Clara vanished, I thought she'd changed her mind, run off without me. Poirot studied him, weighing his words. The story was plausible. Clara's diary hinted at a desire for freedom, and a secret trust fund would explain her desperation. But Duval's omissions and the scream in the alley suggested he was not entirely innocent. The note, though, was a breakthrough, pointing to St. Mary's Cove, a coastal village, a new destination in Clara's trail. You will remain here, monsieur, Poirot said, pocketing the note. I will verify this story. If you lie, the consequences will be severe. As he left the flat, the fog seemed to press closer, mirroring the murkiness of the case. The note to St. Mary's Cove was a lifeline, but the key, the receipt, and Duval's half-truths suggested a deeper conspiracy. Was Clara still alive, hiding on the coast, or had she been betrayed by the man called Black? Poirot hailed a cab, his mind racing toward the sea, determined to follow the Vanishing Heiress's trail to its end. Chapter 8. The Fisherman's Tale. The train to St. Mary's Cove swayed through the dawn, its wheels clattering a steady rhythm as the English countryside unfolded in a blur of mist and green. Hercule Poirot sat in a first-class compartment, his gloved hands folded over his cane, his mind a whirl of connections and contradictions. The note found in Victor Duval's flat fee, meet me at the coast, St. Mary's Cove, Tuesday. Bring the papers. We'll be free. Had set a new course. In the search for Clara Ashbourne. Written in her hand, dated after her disappearance from the Hotel Elysium, it suggested she was alive, plotting her escape with a secret trust fund. Yet the scream in the alley, the forced garden gate, and Duval's evasive half-truths cast a shadow of doubt. Was Clara a fugitive by choice, or a pawn in a larger scheme? The coastal village of St. Mary's Cove emerged from the fog as the train slowed. Its cluster of stone cottages and fishing boats nestled against a rugged shoreline. The air was sharp with salt and seaweed, the cry of gulls a constant chorus. Poirot disembarked, his immaculate suit and polished shoes drawing curious glances from weathered fishermen mending nets on the quay. He adjusted his hat, undeterred, and made his way to the harbor, where the note suggested Clara might have gone. His first stop was a weathered pub, the Salty Anchor, its windows fogged with condensation. Inside, the air was thick with pipe smoke and the murmur of local voices. Poirot approached the bar, where a grizzled man with a face like cracked leather polished glasses with a rag. Monsieur, Poirot said, his voice carrying the authority of purpose, I am Hercule Poirot, seeking a young woman who may have come to this village on Tuesday. She is fair, perhaps 22, possibly traveling alone or with a companion. Have you seen her? The barman squinted, his hands pausing. Tuesday, you say? We get strangers now and then, but a young lady like that might have been one. Saw a girl, hair, covered with a scarf, down by the docks. Didn't stop for a pint. Mine just hurried past, headed for the boats. Poirot's pulse quickened. The boats, you say? Did she board one? The barman shrugged. Couldn't say? You'd best ask old Tom, the fisherman. He's always out on the water, sees everything. You'll find him at the end of the pier, mending his nets. Merci, Poirot said, slipping a coin across the bar. He stepped back into the salty air, his cane tapping as he navigated the slippery pier. Old Tom was a stooped figure, his hands deftly weaving a net, his eyes sharp despite the lines etched by years at sea. Poirot introduced himself, his manner disarming yet insistent. Monsieur Tom, he began, I seek a young woman, fair, who came to this cove on Tuesday. She may have sought passage on a boat. What can you tell me?" Tom's weathered hands paused, his gaze flicking to the horizon. I saw her," he said, his voice low, as if wary of being overheard. "Pretty lass, nervous-like, wearing a dark coat and scarf. She was with a man, cloaked, face hidden. They spoke to Captain Harrow, who runs a small boat for private trips. Saw him board just as the tide turned round dusk." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "This man described him s'il vous plaît." Tom scratched his beard. "Tall, broad shoulders, kept his hat low. Didn't hear his voice, but he moved quick, like he didn't want to be seen. The girl, though she looked scared, kept glancing back at the shore. And this Captain Harrow," Poirot pressed, "where did he take them?" Tom hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Harrow's not one for questions. His boat, the Gull, didn't come back that night. Could have gone anywhere France, maybe, or up the coast. He's known for discreet work, if you catch my meaning. Poirot's mustache twitched. Smuggling, perhaps? Tom's lips tightened, but he didn't deny it. Ask Harrow yourself. He's usually at the boathouse, end of the cove, unless he's out at sea. Poirot thanked him, his mind racing. Clara had boarded a boat, possibly with the cloaked figure. Seen by the gardener, or the man in the dark coat on the train. A mention of smuggling added a dangerous edge to the mystery. Was Clara fleeing with a criminal ally, or had she been coerced? He made his way to the boathouse, a ramshackle structure half swallowed by the dunes. The door was ajar, and inside, a burly man in a woolen cap cleaned a fishing knife with deliberate care. "Captain Harrow?" Poirot inquired, stepping into the dim interior. The man looked up, his eyes hard as flint. "Who's asking?" Harrow growled, his knife glinting in the weak light. "Hercule Poirot, private detective," Poirot replied, undaunted. "I seek a young woman who boarded your boat, the Gull, on Tuesday, with a cloaked companion. Where did you take them?" Harrow's grip tightened on the knife, but his voice remained steady. "I run a fishing boat, mister. Don't keep track of passengers." Poirot's smile was thin. "Come, monsieur, let us not play games. A witness saw the young woman board your vessel. She is missing, perhaps in danger. Speak, or I shall bring the authorities to your door." Harrow's eyes narrowed, but the threat of police loosened his tongue. "All right. I took him across the channel, to a little port near Calais. They paid well, no questions asked. The girl didn't talk much, but the man, she called him V. He handled everything." Poirot's heart leapt. V. Victor Duval, or another using his name? "And where are they now?" Harrow shrugged. "Dropped him at the dock and sailed back. Didn't ask their plans. That's how it works in my trade." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the information. Clara had crossed to France, alive as of Tuesday, but with a mysterious companion. He stepped outside, his eyes scanning the harbor, where the waves churned restlessly. As he turned to leave, a glint in the sand caught his attention, a monogrammed handkerchief, embroidered with the initials J.H. It was fine linen, out of place in this rough setting, and its presence suggested carelessness or haste. He pocketed the handkerchief, adding it to his collection. The diary, earring, cufflink, charred note, scarf, key, receipt, and coded note. The initials J.H. did not match anyone in the case, neither Duval, Rupert, nor the household staff, but they hinted at a new player, perhaps the cloaked figure. Poirot's thoughts turned to France, where Clara's trail now led, but the handkerchief and Harrow's smuggling hinted at a deeper game, one tied to the Ashbourne fortune dot. As he walked back to the village, the fog lifting to reveal a stormy sky, Poirot felt the puzzle tightening. Clara was alive, or had been but the shadow of her companion loomed large. Was it Duval, playing a double game, or another orchestrating her flight? The fisherman's tale had brought him closer, but the sea held secrets yet to be uncovered. Poirot resolved to cross the channel, his determination unwavering as he prepared to chase the vanishing heiress into the heart of danger. Chapter 9. Tides of Deception. The channel crossing was a turbulent affair, the steamer pitching through gray waves under a sky heavy with storm clouds. Hercule Poirot stood at the rail, his overcoat buttoned tightly against the biting wind, his mind as restless as the sea. The fisherman's tale in St. Mary's Cove had propelled him to France, following Clara Ashbourne's trail to a small port near Calais, where Captain Harrow claimed to have delivered her and her cloaked companion. The monogrammed handkerchief, with the initials J.H., found in the sand by the boathouse, was a new enigma, its fine linen suggesting wealth or connection to the Ashbourne household. Was it dropped by Clara's mysterious escort, or another player in this intricate game? Poirot's little gray cells churned, piecing together the diary, the locket, the cufflink, the key, the scarf, the receipt, the coded note, and now this handkerchief, each a thread in a tapestry of deception. The port of Calais emerged from the mist, its docks bustling with fishermen and merchants despite the drizzle. Poirot disembarked, his patent leather shoes clicking on the wet cobblestones as he sought out the harbor master, a stout man with a weathered cap and a ledger thick with entries. "Monsieur," Poirot began, his French impeccable, "I am Hercule." Poirot, investigating a matter of urgency. A young woman, fair, perhaps with a male companion, arrived here Tuesday on a boat from St. Mary's Cove, England. The Gull, captained by Harrow. What can you tell me of their arrival? The harbor master squinted, flipping through his ledger. Tuesday, you say? The Gull docked late, round midnight. 2 passengers, a lady and a man. She kept her. Face covered, scarf and all, but she was young, nervous. The man paid the fees, didn't talk much. They left quick, headed toward the town. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And their destination? Did they hire a carriage, perhaps? The harbor master nodded. Took a cab to the Chateau de Mer, a fancy place up the coast. Belongs to a Baroness Villette. Odd choice for a couple sneaking. In at night, if you ask me. Merci, Poirot said, slipping a franc into the man's hand. The Chateau de Mer, a name that sparked intrigue. A baroness's estate was no place for a fugitive heiress, unless she sought refuge, or was being held. The initials J.H. on the handkerchief nagged at him. Neither Clara nor Victor Duval fit, but the smuggling connection hinted at a larger network. Was this baroness involved, or merely a bystander? A cab ride to the chateau wound through windswept cliffs, the sea crashing below. The Chateau de Mer was a Gothic pile of turrets and stained glass, its grandeur tempered by an air of neglect. Poirot knocked, and a stern-faced butler ushered him into a cavernous hall where tapestries hung heavy with dust. The Baroness Villette, a tall woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes, received him in a velvet-draped salon, her silk gown rustling as she rose. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cool but cultured, "your reputation precedes you. What brings you to my humble home?" Poirot bowed, his manner polished yet probing. "Madame la Baroness, I seek a young woman, Clara Ashbourne, who arrived in Calais on Tuesday, possibly with a companion. I am told they came here. Where is she?" The Baroness's lips curved in a faint smile. "Miss Ashbourne? Yes, she was here, briefly. A charming girl, but distressed. She stayed one night, then left at dawn. I offered her sanctuary, but she was determined to move on." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Alone, madame? Or with her companion?" "Alone," the Baroness replied, her eyes steady. "The man who brought her a rough sort, Not her equal left after an hour. She spoke little, only that she needed. Rest before continuing her journey. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And you asked no questions? An heiress, fleeing in the night, seeks refuge in your chateau, and you accept this without curiosity? The Baroness's smile tightened. I am. Accustomed to discretion, monsieur. My guests come and go, as they please. She left no forwarding address. Poirot nodded, unconvinced. May I see the room she occupied? The Baroness hesitated, then rang a bell. The butler reappeared, leading Poirot to a guest room on the second floor. It was opulent, but cold, with heavy drapes and a canopied bed. Poirot's eyes swept the space, noting the pristine bedspread untouched, as if Clara had not slept. On the dressing table, a faint trace of lavender perfume lingered Clara's scent. He opened a drawer, finding it empty save for a single item. A glove, monogrammed with C.A., its mate missing. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, pocketing the glove. It matched the scarf and confirmed Clara's presence, but the unused bed suggested. No rest, only haste. Had she been coerced to leave, or was the Baroness lying? He returned to the salon, his mind racing. Madame, he said, this glove belongs to Mademoiselle Clara, yet the bed was not slept in. I believe she was taken from here, perhaps against her will. What do you know of her companion? They... Baroness's composure faltered, her fingers tightening on her fan. I told you, he left. I know nothing of him, only that he called himself Black. Poirot's pulse quickened. Mr. Black, again. And you heard nothing else? No names, no plans. The Baroness shook her head, but as Poirot turned to leave, he caught a faint sound, a muffled whisper, from behind a tapestry-covered door. Moved swiftly, pulling the tapestry aside to reveal a hidden staircase. The Baroness rose, her voice sharp. Monsieur, that is private. But Poirot was already descending, his cane tapping softly. The staircase led to a small study, where papers were scattered across a desk. One caught his eye, a ledger listing shipments, coded names, and sums of money. Among them, Black, delivery to Calais, £500. Another entry mentioned Ashbourne consignment, dated Tuesday. Poirot's heart leapt. Clara's fortune, tied to a smuggling ring. He returned to the salon, the ledger tucked under his arm. Madame, he said, his voice cold, this ledger suggests you are involved in more than hospitality. Smuggling. Perhaps with Mademoiselle Clara, as a pawn. Speak, or I shall take this to the gendarmes. The Baroness's face paled, but her voice remained steady. You misunderstand, monsieur. I deal in antiquities, not smuggling. Clara came to me for help, but she left of her own accord. I heard her whisper something about a ransom, but I thought it was fear talking. Ransom, Poirot repeated, his mind flashing to the note at Ashbourne Manor. Do not search for Clara. She is safe. You will remain here, madame, while I verify this. If you lie, the consequences will be severe. As he left the chateau, the glove and ledger joining his collection of clues, Poirot felt the tides of deception shifting. Clara had been here, but her swift departure and the Baroness's evasion suggested coercion. The smuggling ring tied to Mr. Black and the Ashbourne fortune was a new layer, implicating someone powerful perhaps within the manor itself. Poirot hailed a cab for Calais, resolved to trace the smuggling trail and find Clara before the ransom demand became a tragedy. The chateau had revealed its secrets, but the vanishing heiress remained just beyond his grasp, caught in a web of lies and danger. Chapter 10. The French Connection. The wind howled across the cliffs of Calais as Hercule Poirot's cab rattled back from the Chateau de Mer, the ledger and Clara Ashbourne's monogrammed glove heavy in his coat pocket. The Baroness's guarded words, the smuggling ledger, and the whispered mention of a ransom had tightened the knot of the mystery. Clara had been at the chateau, alive but fleeting, her trail marked by fear and secrecy. The coded note to Victor. Duval, the artist and supposed Mr. Black, pointed to St. Mary's Cove, but her swift departure from the Baroness's estate suggested either flight or abduction. Poirot's little gray cells churned, weaving together the diary, earring, cufflink, charred note, scarf, pea, receipt, coded note, handkerchief, glove, and now the ledger each a clue in a puzzle that grew ever more intricate. Calais port was a clamor of activity, with fishing boats unloading their catch and merchants haggling under the drizzle. Poirot sought out the local gendarmerie, a squat stone building overlooking the harbor, to verify the Baroness's story and probe the smuggling connection. The officer on duty, a wiry man named Lieutenant Dubois, greeted him with a nod, his mustache rivaling Poirot's in precision. "Monsieur Poirot," Dubois said, his accent thick, "your reputation is known even here. How may I assist you?" Poirot produced the ledger, its pages open to the entries mentioning Black and Ashbourne consignment. "Lieutenant, I investigate the disappearance of Mademoiselle Clara Ashbourne, an English heiress last seen at the Chateau de Mer. This ledger suggests a smuggling operation, possibly tied to her fate. What do you know of the Baroness Villette and her activities?" Dubois's eyes narrowed as he scanned the ledger. "The Baroness is a figure of interest, monsieur. She claims to trade in antiquities, but we suspect her chateau is a hub for contraband art, jewels, perhaps more. This Black is a name we've heard, a shadow who moves goods across the channel. No one knows his face." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And Mademoiselle Clara?" "She arrived here Tuesday with a cloaked companion. The Baroness claims she left alone, but I found her glove, and the bed was untouched. I believe she was taken." "Perhaps for ransom." Dubois nodded, his expression grim. "Ransom fits. We've had reports of kidnappings tied to smuggling rings' wealthy targets, held for profit. If this girl is an heiress, she's valuable. I'll send men to watch the chateau, but the Baroness is clever. She leaves no traces." "Merci, Lieutenant," Poirot said, handing over the ledger for safekeeping. "I must trace Clara's next step. If she left the chateau, where did she go?" Dubois rubbed his chin. "There's a train from Calais to Paris, popular with those avoiding attention. If she was fleeing or being moved, it's likely she took it. Check the station. The ticket clerk, Madame le Clerc, has a sharp memory." Poirot thanked him and headed to the Calais station, a bustling hub of steam and shouts. Madame le Clerc, a stout woman with keen eyes, stood behind the ticket counter, her ledger open. Poirot described Clara Fair, possibly veiled, traveling Tuesday morning, and mentioned her possible companion. I remember her," Madame le Clerc said, her voice brisk. "A young woman, scarf over her hair, bought a ticket to Paris one way. She was alone, but jumpy, kept looking over her shoulder. Paid in cash, no name given." "Alone?" Poirot pressed, his pulse quickening. "No man with her?" "Tall, cloaked." "Perhaps?" Madame le Clerc shook her head. "No man, monsieur. But I saw a fellow lingering nearby, watching her. Dark coat, hat low. He didn't board, just watched her train leave." Poirot's mind raced. The man in the dark coat seen on the London train, possibly the cloaked figure at St. Mary's Cove, was shadowing Clara, but not traveling with her. Was he her captor, ensuring her compliance, or a separate pursuer? The Baroness's mention of a ransom echoed in his thoughts, suggesting a motive tied to Clara's fortune. "Did she say anything?" Poirot asked. "A destination in Paris." "Perhaps?" "She asked about trains to the South Marseille way," Madame le Clerc replied. "Seemed in a hurry to keep moving." Poirot nodded, slipping her a franc. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful." Paris was the next logical step, but the South Marseille hinted at a longer journey, perhaps an escape beyond France. The smuggling ring, with its coded ledger and Mr. Black, suggested Clara's disappearance was no simple elopement. The handkerchief with J.H. initials, found in St. Mary's Cove, nagged at him possibly a clue to her companion's identity, or a red herring. Before leaving Calais, Poirot returned to the harbor, drawn by a hunch. The docks were quieter now, the fishermen gone, but a small boat caught his eye, moored apart from the others. Its name, the Gull, matched Captain Harrow's. Vessel from St. Mary's Cove. Poirot approached, noting fresh paint on its hull, as if to conceal recent damage. A deckhand, a boy no older than 16, was scrubbing the deck. "Monsieur," Poirot called, his tone friendly. "This is Captain Harrow's boat, oui? Did it sail back from Calais Tuesday night?" The boy glanced up, wary. "Aye, sir. Captain. Brought her back after dropping off them passengers. Been here since." Poirot leaned closer, his voice low. "And these passengers a young woman and a man. Did you see them disembark?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Saw 'em, sir." The lady was quiet, kept her face down. The man, he was tall, wore a cloak. They went straight to a cab, didn't talk to no one. "And anything unusual?" Poirot pressed, slipping a coin into the boy's hand. The boy pocketed it, his voice dropping. "Found something odd when I cleaned the cabin. A bit of paper stuffed in a crack. Looked important, but the captain told me to burn it. I kept it, though." He fished a crumpled scrap from his pocket, handing it to Poirot. It was a torn fragment, written in a hurried scrawl. "Ransom £100,000, Ashburn." The handwriting was not Clara's, but the mention of a ransom confirmed the Baroness's whisper. Poirot's heart raced. This was no longer a theory, but a reality. "Merci, mon ennemi," Poirot said, adding the fragment to his collection. "Tell no one of this, for your safety." As he left the harbor, the pieces were aligning. Clara, fleeing or coerced, had reached Calais, stayed briefly at the chateau, and moved toward Paris, possibly Marseille. The smuggling ring, tied to the Baroness and Mr. Black, was exploiting her fortune, with a ransom demand looming. The J.H. handkerchief and the mysterious companion remained elusive, but the trail was clear. Poirot boarded a train for Paris, the fragment's words ransom, Ashbourne burning in his mind. Clara was alive, but in peril, and the French. Connection had brought him closer to her, yet deeper into a web of tides and deception. Chapter 11. The ransom note. The Paris train rattled through the twilight, its rhythm a counterpoint to Hercule Poirot's restless thoughts. The fragment found on the Gull, ransom, £100,000, Ashburn, confirmed his greatest fears. Clara Ashbourne's disappearance was no mere flight, but a calculated kidnapping, tied to the smuggling ring implicating the Baroness Villette and the elusive Mr. Black. The trail had led from St. Mary's Cove to Calais, and now to Paris, with hints of Marseille as Clara's next destination. Yet the monogrammed handkerchief, J.H., the glove, the ledger, and Victor Duval's coded note swirled in Poirot's mind, each clue a piece of a puzzle that refused to fully form. His little gray cells worked tirelessly, weaving connections between the diary, earring, cufflink, charred note, scarf, key, receipt, coded note, handkerchief, glove, ledger, and now the ransom fragment. Upon arriving at the Gare du Nord, Poirot sent a telegram to Lady Evelyn Ashbourne, urging her to report any new developments, particularly ransom demands. He then checked into a discreet hotel near the station, his room a haven of order amid the chaos of the case. As he arranged his toiletries with precision, A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. A courier, dispatched from London, delivered. An urgent message from Lady Evelyn. Poirot's pulse quickened as he slit the envelope, revealing a single sheet of cheap paper. Its scrawl stark and menacing. £100,000 for Clara's safe return. Leave the money at the Old Oak, Ashbourne Manor Gardens, midnight Friday. No police, or she dies. The handwriting was unfamiliar, jagged, as if written in haste or anger. Poirot sniffed the paper-faint traces of tobacco and coal dust, echoing. The note found at the manor days earlier. Do not search for Clara. She is safe. The similarities were no coincidence. The kidnapper was bold, contacting Lady Evelyn directly. Poirot pocketed the note, adding it to his growing collection, and wired a reply to Lady Evelyn, instructing her to delay any action until his return. The ransom demand shifted the case's urgency. Clara was alive, but her time was running out. Paris buzzed with evening life, its cafes and boulevards a stark contrast to the grim purpose driving Poirot. The ticket clerk's mention of Marseille suggested Clara's trail led south, but the ransom note demanded his return to London. He resolved to pursue one final lead in Paris before catching the night train back to England. A smuggling ring, tied to the Baroness and Mr. Black, likely had operatives in the city, and Clara's possible journey to Marseille hinted at a port connection smuggler's territory. Poirot headed to the Quai des Orfèvres, home of the Screet, to consult. An old acquaintance, Inspector Giraud. The inspector, a lean man with a sharp gaze and a grudging respect for Poirot, welcomed him into a cluttered office. Poirot, Giraud said, his tone wry, what brings you to Paris? Another puzzle too complex for the rest of us? Poirot smiled thinly. A kidnapping, mon ami. An English heiress, Clara Ashbourne, last seen in Calais, possibly bound for Marseille. This, he produced the smuggling ledger, pointing to entries for Black and Ashbourne consignment. This suggests a smuggling ring, and I believe it holds her. What do you know of such operations? Giraud's eyes narrowed as he studied the ledger. This is serious, Poirot. We've been tracking a ring moving art and jewels across the Channel, with ties to Calais and Marseille. Black is a known alias, but we've no face to match it. Marseille is their hub ships leave from there to Africa, the Americas. If your girl's caught up in this, she's likely being moved out of France. Poirot's heart sank. And the Baroness Villette? Giraud snorted. A clever one. We suspect she's a financier, but she's untouchable too well connected. If the girl was at her chateau, she's knee-deep in this mess. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. One more thing, Giraud. This handkerchief, he produced the J.H. monogrammed linen. It was found in St. Mary's Cove, near where Clara boarded a boat. Does it mean anything to you? Giraud examined it, frowning. J.H. could be anyone, but there's a smuggler we've heard of, Sac Hero. No proof, but he's a captain. Runs boats like the one you mentioned. Could be your cloaked man? Poirot's mustache twitched. Jacques Hero, possibly Captain Harrow from St. Mary's Cove, whose initials matched the handkerchief. The pieces were aligning, but time pressed. Merci, Giraud. I return to London tonight. If you hear of Clara or this Harrow, contact me. At once. Back at his hotel, Poirot packed swiftly, his thoughts on the ransom note. The demand for £100,000 to be left at Ashbourne Manor's Old Oak suggested the kidnapper knew the estate intimately, perhaps someone within the household. Rupert's financial troubles, Grayson's guarded demeanor, Miss Lyle's tears, and Jenny's nervousness all resurfaced in his mind. And Victor Duval, the supposed Mr. Black, remained a question mark, lover or conspirator. The night train to Calais was a sleepless journey. The ransom note's words, no police, or she dies, a constant refrain. By dawn, Poirot was back. In London, a cab speeding him to Ashbourne Manor. Lady Evelyn met him in the drawing-room, her face pale, her hands clutching the original ransom note. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered. "This came at dawn, slipped under the door. I've told no one but you. What do we do?" Poirot examined the note again, confirming its match with the fragment from the gull. "Madame, we must be cautious. The kidnapper is close perhaps within these walls. I will analyze this note further, but first I must see Mademoiselle Clarice. Room again. There may be more to uncover." In Clara's room, Poirot moved with purpose, his eyes scanning for overlooked clues. The jewelry box, where Jenny had found the locket, drew his attention. He probed its false bottom, finding nothing new, but a faint scratch on the desk caught his eye a mark like a key's edge. He produced the brass key with the Ashbourne crest, found in the alley at Grimpen Lane, and tested it on the desks. Locked drawer. It turned smoothly, revealing a small velvet pouch containing a sapphire ring and a folded letter. The letter, in Clara's hand, was brief. "If I am gone, Rupert knows why. The trust is mine." Poirot's pulse raced. The ring was valuable, but the letter implicated Rupert, Clara's cousin, whose financial ruin was no secret. Had he orchestrated the kidnapping, using the smuggling ring to extort the fortune? Poirot returned to Lady Evelyn, the letter and ring in hand. "Madame, this suggests your nephew Rupert has knowledge of Clara's fate. I must confront him." Lady Evelyn's eyes widened. "Rupert? He's been distant, but surely not." Poirot's gaze was firm. "We shall see. Summon him, and the household. The truth is near." As Lady Evelyn rang for Grayson, Poirot felt the puzzle tightening. The ransom note, the letter, and the smuggling ring pointed to betrayal within the manor. Clara was alive, but the French connection had led him back to London, where the old oak at midnight would reveal the next move in this deadly game. The Vanishing Heiress was closer than ever, yet danger loomed larger still. Chapter 12. The Midnight Confession. The Drawing-Room of Ashbourne Manor was a crucible of tension as Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled household, his small, precise figure commanding the space. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the faces of Lady Evelyn, Rupert, Grayson, Miss Lyle, and Jenny, each betraying varying degrees of unease. The ransom note demanding £100,000, Clara's letter implicating Rupert, and the web of smuggling tied to Mr. Black had brought Poirot back to London, where the truth was now within reach. His collection of clues, the diary earring, cufflink, charred note, scarf, key, receipt, coded note, handkerchief, glove, ledger, ransom fragment, ring, and letter formed a constellation of evidence, and tonight Poirot intended to illuminate its center. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured. "Mademoiselle Clara Ashbourne has been missing for days, her fate shrouded in deception. Tonight we shall uncover the truth. Each of you holds a piece of this puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, will no longer tolerate silence." Lady Evelyn clutched her handkerchief, her eyes wide. Rupert lounged in a chair, his smile forced. Grayson stood rigid, his butler's composure a mask. Miss Lyle twisted her hands, tears brimming, while Jenny hovered near the door, pale and trembling. Poirot produced the ransom note, holding it aloft. This was delivered to Lady Evelyn, demanding £100,000 for Clara's return. It matches a fragment found in Calais, proof of a kidnapping tied to a smuggling ring. But the note was slipped under the manor's door, suggesting the culprit is among us. Rupert scoffed, his voice edged with bravado. "You're not pointing at me again, are you, Poirot? I've told you, I'm as worried about Clara as anyone." Poirot's gaze sharpened, and he revealed Clara's letter from the desk drawer. "This, Monsieur Rupert, is in Clara's hand. It reads, "If I am gone, Rupert knows why. The trust is mine. You are in financial ruin, non? The trust fund Clara controlled would solve your debts. Did you arrange her disappearance to extort? Her fortune?" Rupert's face flushed, his hands gripping the armrests. "That's preposterous. Clara and I quarreled about the trust. Yes, she wanted to use it to run off, live some bohemian fantasy. But I didn't kidnap her," Lady Evelyn gasped. "Rupert, you never told me this." Poirot turned to Grayson, his tone probing. "Monsieur." "Grayson, the garden gate was forced, yet you claim it was locked. The key hung in your pantry, accessible to all. Did you see anyone take it?" Grayson's jaw tightened, his eyes steady. "No, sir. I locked the gate at 10, as always. The key was in its place when I checked." Poirot nodded, then faced Miss Lyle, whose tears now spilled freely. "Mademoiselle Lyle, you claimed Clara shared no secrets, yet her diary speaks of Victor Duval, the artist. You knew of their meetings, did you not?" Miss Lyle's sobs broke the silence, her voice trembling. "Yes, monsieur, I knew. Clara loved Victor. She wanted to escape the marriage to Lord Haverford's son. I helped her plan to leave, to meet Victor at the gate. But I swear, I thought she'd run off with him." Poirot's eyes gleamed, the pieces aligning. "You helped her, mademoiselle? And when she vanished, you said nothing, fearing blame?" Miss Lyle nodded, collapsing into a chair. "I was afraid Lady Evelyn would dismiss me, or worse. Clara promised to write, but I've heard nothing. I thought she was safe with Victor." Lady Evelyn's voice was sharp. "Miss Lyle, you betrayed my trust. How could you?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Madame, Miss Lyle's confession is but one thread. Clara met Victor Duval at the gate, as planned, but the forced lock and torn shawl suggest interference. She reached London, then St. Mary's Cove and Calais, always shadowed by a cloaked figure, perhaps Mr. Black, tied to a smuggling ring exploiting her fortune." He turned to Jenny, who flinched under his gaze. "Mademoiselle Jenny, you found the locket and the key, yet you tremble. What else do you know?" Jenny's voice was barely a whisper. I saw Mr. Rupert in the garden that night, near the gate, after Miss Clara went out. He was arguing with someone, a man. I couldn't see. I ran back inside, scared. Rupert leapt to his feet, his face livid. That's a lie. I was in my room, as I told you." Poirot's voice cut through the tension, calm but unyielding. "Non, Monsieur Rupert. Your debts, Clara's letter, and Jenny's testimony place you at the scene. You knew of her plan to flee with Duval, oui? Did you intercept her, perhaps? To sell her to the smugglers for ransom?" Rupert's bravado crumbled, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't sell her. I followed her to the gate. Yes, to stop her. She was throwing away the trust, our family's future. I argued with Duval. He was there, cloaked, waiting for her. But Clara slipped away during our fight. I thought she'd gone with him." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you said nothing, allowing Lady Evelyn to believe her niece was kidnapped?" Rupert sank back into his chair, his voice hollow. "I was ashamed. I thought she'd come back when she realized Duval was no good for her." Miss Lyle's sobs quieted, and she looked up, her voice steadier. "Monsieur Poirot," Clara told. "Her Duval was her true love. If she left him, it was because she feared someone in this house." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The midnight confession had clarified Clara's initial escape, Miss Lyle's aid, Duval's meeting, Rupert's interference. But the smuggling ring, the ransom, and the cloaked figure suggested a second act, orchestrated by another hand. The handkerchief with J had possibly Jacques Harrow. The smuggler hinted at a connection to Captain Harrow's boat. "Mise Amos," Poirot said, his tone grave. Clara fled with Duval's help, but her trail leads through a smuggling ring likely, led by a man called Jacques Harrow. The ransom demand suggests she is held, perhaps back in England. I must return to St. Mary's Cove to confront Harrow. Lady Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Monsieur Poirot, bring her back, please. As the household dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze on the fire. Miss Lyle's confession and Rupert's admission had resolved Clara's departure, but the ransom and smuggling ring pointed to a larger conspiracy. The sapphire ring, found with the letter, gleamed in his pocket, symbol of Clara's trust fund and perhaps her captor's motive. Poirot felt the puzzle nearing completion, but the final pieces lay in St. Mary's Cove, where the fisherman's tale and the smuggler's boat awaited. The midnight confession had bared the manor's secrets, but Clara's fate hung in the balance, a vanishing heiress caught in a deadly tide. Chapter 13. The cliffside reunion. The train to St. Mary's Cove swayed through the pre-dawn mist, its rhythm a steady pulse against the urgency driving Hercule Poirot. The midnight confessions at Ashbourne Manor, Miss Lyle's admission of aiding Clara's escape, Rupert's confrontation at the garden gate, and the shadow of a smuggling ring tied to Jacques Harrow had clarified the heiress's initial flight. Yet the ransom note demanding £100,000, the smuggling ledger, and the monogrammed handkerchief, J.H., pointed to a darker plot. Clara Ashbourne had fled to London, then St. Mary's Cove, Calais, and possibly beyond, always shadowed by a cloaked figure. Poirot's collection of clues, the diary, earring, cufflink, charred note, scarf, key, receipt, coded note, handkerchief, glove, ledger, ransom fragment, ring, and letter formed a mosaic of betrayal. And now, the fisherman's tale of Clara. Boarding the Gaul led him back to the coast. The village of St. Mary's Cove was shrouded in fog as Poirot disembarked, the salty air sharp against his face. The harbor was quiet, the fishing boats bobbing like ghosts in the mist. His destination was Captain Harrow's boathouse, where the smuggler, possibly the J.H. of the handkerchief, held answers. But first, Poirot followed a hunch, drawn to the cliffs beyond the village, where secluded cottages offered refuge for those wishing to vanish. Clara's coded note to Victor Duval, mentioning St. Mary's Cove, suggested she might still be here, hiding or held. The cliff path was treacherous, slick with rain and sea spray, but Poirot navigated it with surprising agility, his cane steadying his steps. At the cliff's edge, a lone cottage stood, its windows dark, its chimney trailing a thin wisp of smoke. Poirot's pulse quickened. This was no abandoned shack. He knocked, his knock sharp and deliberate, and the door creaked open to reveal a pale, wide-eyed Clara Ashbourne, her fair hair tangled, her dress simple but unmistakably hers. Mademoiselle Clara. Poirot exclaimed, his voice a mix of relief and urgency. It is I, Hercule Poirot, come to find you. You are safe now. Clara's eyes darted past him, scanning the cliffs. Monsieur Poirot, you shouldn't be here. It's not safe. There, watching. Before he could respond, a figure emerged from the cottage's shadows, Victor Duval, his face haggard, his paint-stained hands clutching a satchel. Poirot, he said, his voice low. You've found us, but you've brought danger closer. Poirot's gaze hardened. Monsieur Duval, or should I say Mr. Black, explain this. Mademoiselle Clara, why are you hiding here? And who threatens? You? Clara sank onto a chair, her voice trembling. I ran from the manor to escape Aunt Evelyn's planned marriage to Lord Haverford's son. Victor helped me, but someone followed us. I thought it was Rupert, but it's bigger than that. They want my trust fund, monsieur. They've demanded a ransom. Poirot produced the ransom note, his eyes never leaving Duval's face. This, mademoiselle? Delivered to your aunt. demanding £100,000. And this, he held up the handkerchief with J.H. initials. Found where you boarded the Gull. It belongs to Jacques Harrow, a smuggler. Is he your captor? Clara shook her head, tears welling. No, Victor isn't my captor. He's protecting. And me. We planned to use the trust fund to start over, but someone betrayed us. I saw a man in Calais, cloaked, following me. Victor thinks it's Harrow, working for someone else. Duval nodded, his voice tense. I took her to the chateau, thinking the Baroness would help, but she's part of it, a smuggling ring. They want Clara's money, and they'll kill her if they don't get it. We came back here to hide, to wait for the solicitor to secure her trust. Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind racing. The ledger I found at the chateau confirms this ring, tied to Mr. Black and an Ashbourne consignment. You, Monsieur Duval, used that name. Why should I believe you are? Not complicit? Duval's eyes flashed with desperation. I used Black to book the hotel, to keep Clara's name out of it. I'm no smuggler, Poirot. I love her. I'd die before letting them take her. Clara clutched his hand, her voice fierce. He's telling the truth, monsieur. They. Smuggling ring they knew about the trust. Someone at the manor told them. Poirot's thoughts turned to Rupert, whose debts and confrontation at the gate made him a suspect, and Grayson, whose access to the key suggested opportunity. Miss. Lyle's aid, though well-meaning, could have been exploited. He stepped to the cottage window, peering into the fog, when a sudden glint caught his eye as signal light, flashing from a boat offshore. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. They are close. Mademoiselle Clara, Monsieur Duval, you must come with. Nay, the police in Calais are watching the Baroness, and I will summon them here. Harrow's boat is near, and he may be coming for you. Clara's face paled, but she nodded. I trust you, Monsieur Poirot. Duval hesitated, his hand tightening on the satchel. What about the papers? The trust fund documents are here. If they get them, Poirot's voice was firm. They will not give them to me, and I will ensure their safety. Duval handed over the satchel, and Poirot tucked it under his arm, his collection of clues now complete. Diary, earring, cufflink, charred note, scarf, key, receipt, coded note, handkerchief, glove, ledger, ransom fragment, ring, letter, and trust documents. The signal light flashed again, closer now, and Poirot's pulse raced. Harrow, or his agents, were closing in, drawn by the ransom's lure. He led Clara and Duval down the cliff path, his cane steady despite the slick stones. At the village, he telephoned the local constable, requesting urgent assistance, and wired Inspector Giraud in Calais to coordinate with the English police. A reunion with Clara was a triumph, but the danger was far from over. The smugglers. Signals suggested a final confrontation loomed, and Poirot's little gray cells were poised to outwit the enemy dot as they reached the harbor. The fog parted, revealing the Gull anchored just offshore, its signal light winking ominously. Poirot gripped his cane, his resolve unyielding. Clara was safe for now, but the cliffside reunion had only sharpened the stakes. The smuggler's net was tightening, and Poirot would need all his ingenuity to bring the vanishing heiress home. Chapter 14. The Little Gray Cell's Triumph. The fog clung to St. Mary's Cove like a conspirator, shrouding the harbor where the Gull lay anchored, its signal light pulsing through the mist. Hercule Poirot stood on the pier, his small, precise figure a beacon of resolve, with Clara Ashbourne and Victor Duval at his side. A cliffside reunion had confirmed Clara's survival. Her flight from Ashbourne Manor, driven by a desire to escape an unwanted marriage and secure her secret trust. Fund. Yet the ransom note, the smuggling ledger, and the monogrammed handkerchief, J.H., pointed to a sinister plot orchestrated by Captain Jacques Hurreau, the smuggler whose boat now loomed offshore. Poirot's collection of clues: diary, earring, cufflink, charred note, scarf, key, receipt, coded note, handkerchief, glove, ledger, ransom fragment, ring, letter, and trust documents, had led him to this moment, where the vanishing heiress's fate hung in the balance. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. "Mademoiselle Clara, Monsieur Duval, remain here," he instructed, his voice low but commanding. "The police are coming, but we must act swiftly. Hurreau's signal light means he knows you are here. I will set a trap to end this." Clara's face was pale, her hand clutching Duval's. "Monsieur Poirot, be careful." "They're dangerous." Duval nodded, his expression grim. "Hurreau's not alone. He works for someone who knew about Clara's trust." Poirot's mustache twitched, his mind flashing to Rupert's debts, Grayson's access to the gate key, and Miss Lyle's complicity. The smuggling ring's reach extended to Ashbourne Manor, and the ransom demand £100,000 to be left at the Old Oak suggested an insider's knowledge. But now, with Clara in his protection, Poirot would turn the tables. He approached the harbor's edge, signaling the local constable, who had arrived with 2 officers. "Messieurs," Poirot said, "Captain Hurreau's boat, the Gull, is our target. He is a smuggler, likely holding information about Mademoiselle Clara's kidnapping. We must board it before he flees." The constable, a burly man named Harris, nodded. "We've got a skiff ready, sir. But Hurreau's slippery, known for running at the first sign of trouble." "Then we must be quicker," Poirot replied. He turned to the harbor master, who stood nearby, and requested a lantern to signal the Gull. "We will lure Hurreau to shore, pretending to deliver the ransom." The plan was simple but precise. Poirot would pose as a courier for Lady Evelyn, signaling that the ransom money was ready. The police would hide near the pier, ready to apprehend Hurreau when he landed. Clara and Duval were to remain concealed in the harbor master's office, guarded by an officer. Poirot clutched the satchel containing the trust documents, a decoy, for the ransom, and began flashing the lantern in a deliberate pattern, mimicking a smuggler's code he had gleaned from the ledger. Minutes passed, the fog swirling, until a rowboat detached from the Gull, its oars cutting silently through the water. A single figure, cloaked and broad-shouldered, rowed toward the pier. Poirot's pulse quickened. Jacques Hurreau, the JH of the handkerchief, was taking the bait dot as the boat neared. Poirot stepped forward, the satchel raised. "Monsieur Hurreau," he called, his voice carrying over the lapping waves, "I have the money as demanded. Where is Mademoiselle Clara?" The figure stepped onto the pier, his face obscured by a low hat. "You're not Lady Evelyn's man," he growled, his voice rough with a coastal accent. "Who are you?" "Hercule Poirot," he replied, his tone calm but unyielding. "And you, monsieur, are Jacques Hurreau, smuggler and kidnapper. You will tell me who employed you to take Mademoiselle Clara, or you will face the police." Hurreau's hand moved to his coat, but before he could draw a weapon, the officers emerged from the shadows, their truncheons raised. Hurreau froze, his eyes darting, then raised his hands in surrender. All right," he muttered. "I didn't kidnap her. I just ferried her to Calais, on orders." "Whose orders?" Poirot demanded, his gaze piercing. Hurreau's jaw tightened. "A man from the manor. Paid me to get the girl out of England, said she was trouble. Didn't give a name, but he knew her plans knew about the trust." Poirot's mind raced. Rupert, with his debts and confrontation at the gate, was the likely culprit. But Grayson's access to the key and Miss Lyle's knowledge of Clara's plans could not be dismissed. "And the ransom?" Poirot pressed. "You wrote the note? We?" Hurreau shook his head. "Not me. The man who hired me. He sent it." Said it'd flush out the money. I just did the job. The officers cuffed Harrow, leading him to the harbormaster's office for questioning. Poirot followed, his thoughts on the matter. Clara and Duval emerged, relief flooding their faces as they saw Harrow in custody. "Monsieur Poirot," Clara said, "you've saved me." "Not yet, mademoiselle," Poirot replied. "We return to Ashbourne Manor. The mastermind of this scheme is there, and I will expose them." The journey back to London was swift, Clara and Duval under police protection. At the manor, Lady Evelyn met them in the hall, tears streaming. As she embraced her niece, "Clara, thank God." "Monsieur Poirot, how can I ever repay you?" "The truth, madame," Poirot said, gathering the household once more in the drawing-room. Rupert, Grayson, Miss Lyle, and Jenny stood before him, their faces a mix of relief and dread. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice blade of clarity. Mademoiselle Clara fled to escape a forced marriage, aided by Miss Lyle and Victor Duval, but someone betrayed her plans, hiring Jacques Haro to spirit her to Calais, where a smuggling ring sought her trust fund through ransom. "That someone is here." He turned to Rupert, producing a letter. "If I am gone, Rupert knows why. Monsieur Rupert, your debts are known, and you followed Clara to the gate, arguing with Duval. Did you sell her to Harrow?" Rupert paled, shaking his head. "I swear, I only wanted to stop her. I didn't hire anyone." Poirot's gaze shifted to Grayson, holding up the brass key. "Monsieur Grayson, this key, found in Griffin Lane, opened Clara's desk, where her trust documents were hidden. You had access to the pantry key, and you checked the gate. Did you pass her plans to Harrow?" Grayson's composure cracked, his voice low. I took money from a man in London. He said it was to watch Clara report her movements. I didn't know it would lead to this." Poirot nodded, the final piece clicking into place. "And this man, Messieurs, was an agent of the smuggling ring, using you to track Clara. The ring, led by the Baroness Villette, sought her fortune, but you, Grayson, were their unwitting pawn." The butler sank into a chair, head bowed. "Lady?" Evelyn gasped, but Poirot raised a hand. "Mademoiselle Clara is safe, madame, and the trust is secure. Harrow is in custody, and the police will pursue the Baroness. The little gray cells of Hercule Poirot have triumphed." As the household dispersed, Clara approached Poirot, her eyes grateful. "Monsieur, you've given me my freedom." Poirot bowed, his mustache curling with a satisfied smile. "It is my purpose, mademoiselle, to restore order where chaos reigns." He left the manor, his collection of clues now a testament to his victory. The vanishing heiress was found, the smugglers thwarted, and the truth laid bare. As he stepped into the London dawn, Poirot's little gray cells hummed contentedly, this puzzle complete.